So today we want to talk about work-life balance or the myth around work-life balance. That should be a very interesting topic. And John, you have written a very well-researched article around work-life balance, which we want to dig into today because there's so much information in there.
Yeah, well, there is. And I'd also like to let our listeners know that if they stick around to the end, we're going to summarize all this information we're going to go over in about the next 30 minutes. But if you
Yeah.
stick all the way through, it'll be well worth your while to get the full understanding that work-life balance is a myth. Um, and we'll talk all about that.
Yeah, the good points come at the end, so you have to hang around. Um, yeah, interesting topic, work-life balance.
Yes, well, did you know that apparently it wasn't a thing 30 years ago?
Oh,
But I
too
think it
early.
was, but I think it was that people didn't talk about it or didn't label it work-life balance. Because I
Yes,
certainly
interesting.
remember raising a young family and feeling the pressure to be at work and
Yeah,
back in the day,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I
I mean, we have the track record because we were there 30 years ago. I also have to admit that. Yeah. And yeah, you have written a very well-researched article on work-life balance.
well, yes,
And
I did,
and we
Jack, back in March 22, I think it was published.
yeah,
I
yeah,
talked
yeah,
about it being work-life integration
yeah.
versus a work-life balance, because one of the big myths about work-life balance is that we have a work life and we have a home life. No, we are human beings. We have but one life. So let's set aside the idea that there's these two different entities for a
Mm,
starter. You have one life. What we do know is that one nourishes the other. Your home life is not going to go too well unless you have a successful work life when you're earning what you need to sustain that life. And your work life is not going to flourish unless your home life is flourishing.
mm. Interesting. Yeah, well, that makes sense. And we will put the link to your article, which is really worthwhile reading. We will put the link in the description box below. So if anyone would want to read the article, I can highly recommend it. Yeah, so let's start with the challenges about work-life balance. It's, I mean, I remember I basically started in the corporate in the mid 90s. It's a while ago. And I
Mm.
remember all of a sudden we had these things, they weren't as smart as they are today, but we had mobile phones. We were, available all the time. All of a sudden, the internet came out. I mean, for our younger viewers, that would be, incomprehensible. I still worked with post-it notes, and post-it notes were invented in the 90s. So I even worked before post-it notes. Anyway, let's not go there. And I remember that obviously my contract always said that I need to be available at certain times, for extended time, whatever in
Mm.
reasonable sort of situations. But then these mobile phone came out, and we were available all the time.
Yeah.
And that was really challenging. All of a sudden, your manager could call you after dinner, and there was
Yeah,
the
and
phone.
this is where the word reasonable, the terms and conditions behind the word reasonable changed. And you know, I do think we as a generation, because we bridged the analog and digital ages from the industrial age into the information age. The world is going through one of the well, historically, I believe, looking back, this is like the beginning of the industrial age. It's going to be marked down. 1993, in my view, is when it was when the information age got underway because that's when the browser was invented. And
Mm.
so we were able to not go, was it Google? What was it?
No, it
Had a
wasn't
mountain on
Google.
it.
It was Netscape. Oh, I hate to say
Netscape and some others, yes. So that the
and
original
some other.
browsers, and you were able to go and yeah,
Google came
and
later.
find out stuff on the info on the internet, and it was amazing. I remember having lived through it. I think there was an initial rush of gee, this is going to be everything. It's going to be world peace and amazing. But what it's come down to is a huge invasion of our privacy. And now you've got the situation where is that if you're not paying, you're the product. So you now know that. And this creep into our personal lives of work, the invasion, and I think the pandemic obviously made that a little bit worse actually, because we all went home and then we learned to work from home. We thought, okay, well, we can do some working from home. So therefore, it's like, oh, well, just because you're at home doesn't mean you're not working or
Mm.
not available to work. But the funny thing about all of this, otherwise we've got iPhones and all the rest of this now, this connectivity, which is insane. You know, like I used messages yesterday to talk to my friend in Oklahoma who just did like me, had a knee replacement. And he's just normal. It's just normal. Whereas 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been heard of. So I think this is where this thing about work-life balance wasn't a thing 30 years ago. Well, because we didn't have this invasive technology, as you're pointing out, that just keeps taking up time and all the rest of it. And it's interesting to note that here in Australia, the government has introduced legislation that gives workers the right to disconnect so that they can't be sacked or disciplined for not being available.
Well. Um, I have a thing to say to that. I mean, we seem to be getting legislations out there for
Mm.
everything, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing as such, but I also think, you know, can we not? And I don't know the detail of the legislation. Can we not make arrangements with our manager and our team, and can we not, discuss this? I'm sure we can, and I'm sure the legislation is there if that's not followed through properly. And then we have to
I
put a
agree.
legislation in.
I agree. What the heck are we doing legislating it? But the reason I bring it up is just to emphasize the point. This is a thing. There is
That's
a thing. So in the article, I go and look at the thing. So do you
mm,
know do you know when this was first researched, the length of hours? So there was a guy called Dr. Ernst Arbe, who was one of the founders of Zeiss lenses in Germany.
Germany's,
Know any
yes.
Germans? I don't care.
Of course, the
He conducted
Germans.
he conducted an experiment on his factory workers, um, and the conclusion was reducing working hours from 9 to 8 hours per day, instead of reducing daily production, actually increased daily
Mm.
production. So there was our first clue. And what was that? That was a hundred and nearly 120 years ago. That was that. But and if that were just a one-off, maybe we could ignore it, right? But hang on, there we go. Then Ford got into it, and they decided that in was it 1914, Ford doubled their workers' salary and reduced their working day from 9 to 8 hours. Well, Henry
Double their
Ford was a
salary?
doubled their salary. Henry Ford was
And
a lot of things, but not a philanthropist when it came to his workforce. He was a philanthropist elsewhere, but like he did that. Why? Because it's not about being nice, it's about making money. So if he gets extra productivity out of reducing the hours, and then look, in 26, so 12 years later, they went on to introduce the 5-day working week, which allowed employees more time to relax, be with their families. And the other major thing it did? it enabled them to consume, go shopping.
That's that's right. I mean, we don't want, we don't want to be too cynical, but I mean, um, it, at least they would see, that if we don't enslave our employees too much, and we give them a little bit more time and time to relax, it actually increases productivity. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah, I remember for Henry Ford, he wanted also his employees to buy the car. He
yeah,
said,
that's right.
he could have sold it for a lot more, but he said, no, I want everyone to buy the car, not just a selected
Yeah.
number of people. I mean, it is interesting. um, I mean, it's good that people looked at it and understood if we just crack the whip all the time, that's just exhausting our employees. And I remember
Mm.
when I was working for a large global corporation, which I really enjoyed working for them, and I might have not mentioned their name before, which was Schneider Electric.
Hmm.
They realized at some point, because it's a global company and you have to, liaise with people across the world, and they realized that their senior leadership was too exhausted because they were trying to match all these different time zones. So they actually had a campaign which worked, where they said, set your boundaries, manage, when you can be available or will be available after hours. You don't have to be available every day. And it worked. And
Yeah.
they also understood that the head office, which was in France, because it's a French company, and it's nothing against the French, it's just the head office, that they were expecting everyone to be available all the time. And he actually also managed the head office and said, you cannot, expect everyone to be available all the time just because you're
Mm.
sitting in France and you think you can do that. And I thought that was really good, and they really made an effort, and it helped.
And that's an integrous way to approach the issue. It said from the
Yeah,
company who have the power, we trust you. And this is where this article goes to. It goes to the issue here. There's I want to jump into the 21st century first. I want to get this out because one thing these iPhones and computers and Zoom and all the rest of it has done is increased our ability to produce in shorter times. We're able to reduce travel and then get in and do what needs to be done. And so nowadays, there was a study done in 2021, was titled "This is how shorter working hours can affect your productivity," and it was published in the World Economic Forum website. So it's pretty good stuff. And so, what was the conclusion? The conclusion came that, in fact, we should now perhaps be looking at 4-day weeks and or even less, because again, it would be good for economics because people are out in the wild spending and enjoying life while still earning the same amount while not affecting the return on capital. So it's not just a thing of the past, but it's how we address this. And that's
yeah,
why what Schneider did was
yeah.
was very, very smart because they said it's in our power to trust our employees. And but we still have the story that's out there. You have to work hard. You have to be first to the office, last to leave. And the professional groups like lawyers and doctors are the worst.
I mean,
You
I
know,
mean,
thrashing
the
young registrars and junior lawyers and saying, "Oh well, if you're not here, you're not tough enough. You're not." It doesn't work. You're getting a lower standard of work. Essentially, once you've been at work for more than 50 hours without having a substantive break or days of break, then you are roughly 20% as efficient as what you were on full power. So you carrying on and saying, "Oh, well, I have to do this," it's incredibly egotistical, really. You're saying that you at 20% of your capacity is better than somebody else at 100%, fresh mind looking at it. And
And
that's, I think, what Schneider obviously realized, because it leads to mistakes.
that's right. And a lack of productivity and unhappy employees and dissatisfied, stressed employees, while the whole situation can be so improved on both sides.
Yeah. And
And
then you got turnover
and
of staff, start losing
that's
people.
that's right. And one of the things, I mean, I remember when I also still was in the corporate and I mentored other younger, upcoming, emerging leaders, I also needed to mentor them to stand up for their values and their boundaries and to learn to
Mm.
negotiate this with their manager and to have the courage to say, well, I have a family at home. I need to leave at 5 or 6 or whatever the time is.
Yeah.
And I also found, I mean, that type of negotiation is often missed in the interviewing process already. This is where you have the most negotiating power, is before you're actually hired, where you can say, look, I do have a family, which I did when I started working in the corporate. I said, I'm a single mother at the time, and there are limits to how much I can work and how much I was willing to work. And I said to myself, I will not miss one of my daughter's school performances. I will not do that. And I think that's also important to understand your values and then manage your boundaries. And then sometimes there are exceptions. I mean, but as in that you say, okay, I'm coming in over the weekend. And sometimes that was part of my job when we were delivering.
Mm.
I needed to be there over the weekend, and that was perfectly fine. It's
Mm.
manageable.
Mm.
And I think the trust is such an important point you brought up. Building the trust with your manager and your peers, and not putting up this facade, oh, I'm the last one to leave the office,
Mm.
um, and having the courage to leave when you need to leave.
Yeah, and I would call that industrial thinking. I remember the last time that, I missed a lot of my children's events. I regret it bitterly, because it's now that life, what I was doing then is now no longer relevant, but those events are gone and gone forever. So I wasn't being fair to myself. I wasn't being integrous to my family. Um, but, you know, when you don't know, you don't know. And I'm hoping that the people that are listening to this podcast are interested in enough to go, oh, hang on, let's go listen to about what I can do to produce an environment where I get that integration, where my family's working and my job's working, and and I'm thriving, because that's what it's about.
That's right. And it's really, I mean, very important also for our listeners to understand values can change. And you're right, if you have kids, this time, never comes back. So you want to be conscious around, how to manage your life. And even if you don't have a family, there's a social life that's important too, to have this balance of social life and, maybe some traveling or some, exercise. It is all important. It creates, as you said, it creates this environment that is conducive for me flourishing as well as I can. And that's what it is about. It's not about
And
being lazy or avoiding, it's about thriving.
and in doing so, you become a leader to your family. You become a leader in your workplace because you're thriving. You're getting the job done. Nobody's saying don't get the job done. Nobody's saying
Yeah,
skive off. Nobody's saying be irresponsible. In fact, we're saying exactly the opposite. I would say that uh, if you are working too longer hours, you're being irresponsible to yourself and to your company and not reporting that. I write in the article about it, what I describe here, a tag team whispering exercise, where reality gets lost in groupthink, because your boss wants to impress his boss, or her boss, and she's going in early, and therefore you feel the need to feed that belief. So you get in there early and you stay late, and And nobody's talking about the facts, but the facts are all there. This is an unproductive practice that will increase staff turnover, increase your costs, ruin your productivity because you'll have faults, more faults. And it doesn't really matter what level of job you're at. I mean, if you're on a factory floor and you're doing too many hours of overtime, you increase the possibility of errors and also industrial accidents.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you are the CEO of a company and you're just completely consumed by your job and you don't have any downtime, what does that say about your perspective on your workforce and on the world and your ability to have vision? Because the CEO's job is to look out the window of a company metaphorically and say,
Yeah.
this is we're going this way.
Yeah.
But if they're
Yeah.
completely consumed in the job, then I would argue that that's not healthy. So this is a situation where you said before about mentoring young execs to find the courage to talk to their bosses and be honest, speak the truth, speak their truth with an integrity and say, I have children and I need to be with my children to refuel my soul and my heart and to help my partner or if you're on your own like you were, well, that's the most important relationship in your life.
That's right, and eventually it will catch up with you. I mean, I've seen burnout, and once you get to this point, you kind of have to crawl, out of a ditch, um, to recover from burnout. It's quite substantial.
Uh, you want to know about burnout? I own burnout.
Yeah, I know. I know. I didn't want to, I didn't
That's
want to
that
point in
that's
your
that's
direction.
what happened, Jack. That's what happened. I was ignoring all the signs because in my mind I had to work harder. I had to win, win, win. There was no backing off. I was one of those terrible role models in leadership roles that just did the work and said, "Oh, well, family, that's the wife's problem. She'll look after that." Right. So a couple of things happened. I burned out, got divorced, cost me absolute bloody mozza in terms of lost income, let alone the assets having to be split and all the rest of it. If you want to go from being reasonably well off to just get a divorce, work every time. Lawyers do very nicely. The point being, this is a very real thing that everybody is responsible for. And even if your boss is captured in the industrial hamster wheel of working harder, that's not going to work. And that's also when the being conversation comes back in again, Jack, because when we talk about um, being, we talk about the context in which one's approaching life. So if you're approaching life from the point of view that in order to get results, you have to keep working harder, well, there's only so much work you can do in a year. There's only
Yeah.
there's only 365 days, and you've got to sleep 8 hours of each of them, or 6 hours, or whatever. But at least a quarter of your day is gone. And then, if you don't rest and have recreation and allow your mind to enjoy the world, then you get very strange, you get very focused, and then one day you wake up and go, I won't use the language, but it's just a nah, not doing it. Just stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that's a crunch you don't want to get to.
Yeah.
You do not want to get to that crunch, because and I know that the suicide rate amongst men in their mid 40s is terrible. Sometimes they get to the situation like I did, where I look at my insurance policy, my life insurance policy, and say, you know what? If I'm not here, my family are going to get all this money. They'll be good. I'll be gone. I've had a good life. That's thinking. But that's when you get trapped in that context of just being focused on your work. It's not
It
living.
is, and I sort of also when you're still young, like in your 20s, maybe you don't experience it. You're full of energy. You don't quite see it, and it's also it's also okay to focus on work and
Hmm.
sort of really become successful. Um, and but there's a time also where then the sort of values may change, and you think, okay, I want to start a family now, and I think this is where it becomes critical for most people that they don't see the switch. Okay, now I'm starting a family, for example. Now I cannot work as I used to in my 20s. I have to
Hmm.
be a little bit more moderate. And I think this is where it's often missed. And then, the exhaustion is keeping up and is piling up, I mean.
Hmm.
And there are so many different ways, I mean, to have this, mythological work-life balance. I remember one of my employees, she had two younger children who went to work, sorry, to school, and her husband was also working, and we arranged that she can leave work and pick up her children and do what she needed to do. And then she would work the remaining hours later from home. And she did. I
Right.
trusted her. She did her job. And, there's sort of different ways of thinking about it, what that means, work-life balance or integration, as you said. Um, and
But it comes down to this word trust, doesn't it? So, and trust in my book is built on authenticity. How authentic are you? How attached to the truth are you? It's based on awareness. It's based on vulnerability. You know, okay, are you prepared to be your soul and tell us what you need, or are you too afraid to do that?
mm, yeah,
And the
yeah,
other thing that I think is super important in this. Oh, what a Oh, no, that's a no. That was not really I wanted to bring it because when you're vulnerable and you're authentic, then integrity, that was the other part of it. And you have an integrity in the context of a foundation stone or a port or a bridge. There's a certain level of integrity that is necessary for it to function.
mm,
And as an employee, you need to have that integrity, and your company needs to know that you have that ability to do the job. And once they know that, and they know that you are being open and authentic, telling the truth about the situation, and being vulnerable and sharing that with them, then you set up an environment where they can and will respond if they're a decent company, will respond in kind because you've been
yeah,
vulnerable towards them. They're likely to go, right, okay, well, we really need you to get this done. This is our concerns, this is our worries. And you have that negotiation and you work it out. But it can be done, and I believe it can be done in 99% of cases. And if it can't, take your talent, your honesty, your integrity, and find another job.
yeah. And I think this negotiation, um, this is in most of the cases it will work. You will come to a conclusion. And what I've also found in most cases, people don't do it. They already think, oh, my boss is not going to allow it, or is this not going to
Right.
happen? No, actually start talking about it. Be clear on what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Sort of have your boundaries and your values sorted, and discuss it with your manager. And I always find there's always a solution and a compromise. I mean, life is not perfect. We always like to have this perfect balance. That's where the name comes from. And that's
Yeah.
why it is mythology, because there is no perfect balance. in
No,
life.
no.
Um, Whether
We
you
Librans
have
spend our life looking for it, but we can't. We don't ever find it.
that's right. We're both Libra. We love the balance. Um, and yeah, it's that's also life and that's where leadership comes in, where you got to manage your life and your work life. And there are so many different options these days, which is positive. There are options. You can go to the office, you can arrange to work from home on certain days,
Hmm.
and make it as flexible or as adjusted as you need for your life to work.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think as a species, we're still figuring this out. This
yeah,
because this is relatively new. The computing power that far exceeds the modules that went to the moon and all the rest of it, just sitting here, and we're nowhere near the end of the story. Not even close. We've just got AI, which I would suggest is the information age equivalent to the steam engine in the industrial age. So we came a long way after that. We have no idea. But I think what's really important for each and every person listening to this, they are valuable. They're each unique person. They have something to contribute. So contribute. In the Andrea method and the speak your truth lesson, we talk about if you speak your truth, you'll not only set yourself free, but the chances are you'll set the other person free as well.
oh, that's
So
cool. Yeah, I love
for
that.
all you know, your boss is battling the same demons.
Yeah.
And if you go to your boss and be polite and clear and concise and aligned with your values and speak your truth, might turn around to you and go, oh shit, you're right. Let's try and work this out as a team. How do we work this out? That would be the great response from a boss who
Yeah.
says,
Yeah.
"Okay, I don't know all the answers, but let's get the team in. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And I believe each and every workplace that becomes like that is going to have more engaged employees. Again, we're talking 3.5 times the productivity of a disengaged employee. If you're distracted, you're always worried about being away, what's happening with your kid on pickup, or um, you're too tired, then this is not good for the company. It's just not good business.
Mm.
I remember one of my favorite books, Jack, is Natural Capitalism. And it's a book on why being environmentally friendly in a business has got nothing to do with being environmentally friendly and everything to do with making money. Because if you reduce waste, you make money. So it is a virtuous circle. And this is the same virtuous circle here. If you look after your employees, they're going to be more productive and you're going to make more money. So talking to bosses that are listening here, you need to make sure that after 40 hours, you're sending your crew home. You're saying,
And
get that
and I'll
balance into you.
go go home now. Yeah. And it comes
Yeah.
back, see, it always comes back to the trust and creating the trusting relationship with, your peers and your manager, up and down. And also, I mean, um, sometimes work can be very consuming, and you go home and you have your time off, and then you're consumed with work, and then you're actually not really enjoying the time at home. And that's probably another whole topic I don't really want to go into today, because
I was going to say, that's another can of worms, but
that's another can of worms, that you can, manage yourself in this balance, that when you're with your family or with your kids, you're with your kids, and you whatever you've agreed to do, that's what you're doing.
and this is the trust and integrity thing again, okay? Because uh, you might have work problems, and we all know the subconscious goes away and works away on its own while we're consciously doing something else. Now, another thing about being away from the coal face and away from staring down that problem that might be a massive problem at work, if you have the trust in your employer, and the employers trust, you've got to go, rest, go, right? It might be that you're out playing ball with your kid, and all of a sudden you'll go, got it. The answer comes to you. That's the way our brains work. It's computing it behind, and it might have something to, or the neighbor says something to you, but you've got to be exposed to those environments. That's input that stimulates the brain and can often solve the problem. Whereas you're just staying in that silo, staring at the problem, it only gets worse and bigger and more imposing, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that does lead to burnout.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I guess what we're saying here, for summarize it, is if you are not having an integrated life where your home life is supporting your work life and your work life is supporting your home life, then look to your values. Find out what your work, do some work and find out what matters to you. And ideally, find yourself at a job that aligns with your values, because you'll find yourself far more engaged. You'll be far more valuable to that company than one where your values clash with what their values are.
That's right.
But if you're in
Yeah.
a situation where you need to have that discussion with your boss, well, work out what you're going to say. Make sure that it's the truth, it's honest, and it's from the heart. Because when you speak from the heart, it doesn't come across as an attack. It comes across as vulnerability. It comes across as saying, "Oh, you really are opening up to me here, aren't you?"
Yeah.
Some bosses don't do that well, I got to tell you. But most of the time, humans recognize when somebody's being vulnerable and requesting help. But it can be done if you've got a great job, but there's this issue here. If it's that good, go talk to your boss. Go have that
Yeah.
discussion. And I'm sure they will see you are that good and they will want to compromise and work with you. But I understand that it is a total myth that you have a work life and you have a home life. You have a life, and it is completely integrated. And you want to read more about it, read the article. The link will be in
Yeah,
down below.
definitely read this very well researched article. It's very enlightening. And the link is down in the description box. And yeah, well, thanks, John. That was
You're
a really
welcome. We're
good
welcome. It
pleasure.
was yeah, and we'll talk to everybody again very
Next
shortly
time.
next time.